Hi, and welcome to a walk through the Hollywood Strings 2, a new orchestral library by East West. It's a really great new addition to the really complete offering that East West has already. And the main characteristic of this library is that it has very small string sections. So rather than having the full 18 violins one that we find in the Hollywood strings, this one has very much smaller sections. For example, the violins one are 6 strings, 6 chairs, right? So if we navigate to the Browse tab here, we can see that the first violins have 6 players. I love that East West offers us this option to see a detailed description of whatever articulation we choose here, right? So if I go to first violins long, I'm going to see all my options here. And the different sections are violins 1, violins 2, violas, celli, basses, and the full string section. So basically we have the traditional 5 sections plus the full strings that allow us to have over the entire range of our MIDI controller the full string orchestra. So as I was saying, this new library, it's really targeted towards a more intimate and cozy sound, where we really try to get something that is not too big and too bombastic, but rather more intimate. So the first violins are 6. They have 6 players. The second violins have 4 players, and our violas have actually still with 4 players, and the celli go down to 4 players as well, while the basses goes down to 3 players. So as you can see, really small and intimate sections. By the way, I would love you to check my full review on audiofader.com. You can check it out there for a more detailed info about all the different features of Hollywood Strings 2. So let's see how it sounds, right? Hollywood Strings 2 uses the traditional Opus player, which I love. It's really detailed, it's very powerful, but at the same time it's very easy to use. And if you don't want to dig too deep into all the small features, you can easily just load your sounds and start sequencing. So here I have one instance of Opus player inside Logic Pro. I have one MIDI channel 1, where I loaded some violins, but as you can see, it's very easy to navigate through this. So I can go to my Hollywood Strings 2, first violins, and then choose the type of articulation that I want to start sequencing with. And every section has long, short, effects, legato, and key switches. The only exception is full strings that has only long, short effects, and then it has a live 21-piece ensemble that is great for just sketching out ideas. It's basically a sustained patch that covers the entire orchestra laid out on the entire keyboard. So the first violins sound, as I said, definitely smaller than Hollywood Strings, and I'm going to compare them in a second. But if I go to my sustain full, here we go. It is really a beautiful, sweet, and not aggressive sound. I particularly like using low dynamics. We can control the dynamics for long articulations with controller 11 expression. For shorter articulation, we can use MIDI velocity to control the dynamics. But as I was saying, the low dynamics really work very well. If I go to, for example, the legato patches, right, and we load the legato slur, for example, Really a beautiful sound. Now, of course, I can use louder dynamics, right? But they get pretty aggressive. But what I like is that I have the full range. I can sequence with low dynamics and get a very intimate and small and sweet sound. But I can go to higher dynamics and get something more aggressive. So there's the all range there for you to play with. So let's just go through some articulations. So we have the long here, and among them I have the détaché. What I really like about the Opus player is that I can simply tap on an articulation and hear it, have a preview. So that's great because it allows me to quickly put together my ideal articulation for whatever piece I'm sequencing. But let's go, for example, to the first violin sustain expressive. Really beautiful sound. Keep in mind that what we are hearing is generated all from Hollywood Strings 2. There's no additional reverb on the DAW channel, so it's just everything that is in the library. If we go to the short, the marcato are excellent. And one of my favorite is actually the pizzicato. They are super gentle, very small, but very, very that cut through the mix very easily. So I love them because usually MIDI pizzicato sound very artificial and they sound bigger than what they are, but these lower dynamics are really beautiful. I can really hear the the fingers of the players, right, caressing the strings. It's really beautiful. The staccato are also great. These are round robin by 10, so there are 10 round robins. Among the effects, I love the flautando. Flautando is a technique that players use to bow the strings, but with very, very little pressure. So it's a very smooth and glassy type of soft sound. Right, so really beautiful for soft passages. Harmonics also sound really, really good. Again, about low and high dynamics. I can really hear the high resonance of the harmonics, beautiful. I also have tremolo. And then if I go to legato, this is where the library really shines. I had some I have tons of options here, but let's hear the legato slur. Now, when I'm in legato mode, what happens is that automatically, if I check in my player, the mono through legato is engaged. This means that I basically just can play one note at a time, and when two notes overlap, I'm gonna hear a very nice and natural transition between one note and the other. So very expressive, very smooth, and definitely smaller section. Let me just play the cello just to hear the difference between all the different sections. And in fact, let's go to the legato, and we're going to try the legato bow change articulation. Here with the bow change articulation, it allows me to hear a bow change every other note when they're not overlapping, right? So here we go. Super, super beautiful sound. Let's just compare, for example, two violins, but from Hollywood strings, right? So as you can see, in Hollywood strings, I have 18 violins. So I'm going to try the legato again so we can compare it. And just to hear the difference between the size of the two orchestras. I think Hollywood Strings 2 is a great expansion if you already have Hollywood strings. But even if you're looking for something that that you don't have already, so even if you don't have Hollywood strings, but you want to get a smaller type of orchestra, Hollywood Strings 2 is really, really a good option. Here we go. This is Hollywood Strings violins. And it's a beautiful sound, really, really good. But let's compare it to the first violin in legato mode of Hollywood Strings 2. As you can hear, definitely smaller, definitely more intimate. The other difference is that with Hollywood Strings 2, I'm controlling the dynamics with my controller 11 expression, and with controller 1, I control the vibrato. So no vibrato and vibrato. The difference is pretty small. It's not a very obvious vibrato, but I like that. I like that it's subtle, and it can really make your parts alive, right? If I go to the key switch option, of course I have my key switch master, and when I use a key switch patch, I have available most of the articulations, and I can access them by just sending key switches, which are notes outside the instrument range, right? So of course this uses more RAM, so the loading time is definitely longer, but it's a really good options, especially if you plan to use different articulations in your sequence. So because I loaded a key switch master, if I go to play and I go to articulation, I'm going to see all the articulations available here. These are the default key switches assigned. If I go to my articulation menu up here, I can see that these are the default key switches assigned, but I can change them. I can just tap there and pick a different articulation if I want, right? Just tap there, click there, and just change the articulation. I can also change how the articulation behaves. It can be a permanent or a temporary. And if I don't need an articulation, I can just turn it off, and that will free up some RAM. So let's hear some of these articulations so we can just see the whole range. So this is my sustain full. This is my sustain, but with some more expression. Then I have my flautando. Very delicate. Add the détaché. I have my staccato. My spiccato. Marcato. And then the beautiful pizzicato that we already heard. The collegno. Collegno is really beautiful as well. That's when we hit the strings with the wooden part of the bow. Then we have a legato with the bow change. Here's our legato with a slur effect between notes. Then we have the harmonics that we already heard. And tremolo. So as you can see, when we load the key switch patch, it has really pretty much all the articulations that we need. So let's go back to our sustain expression that are the most the smoother ones, that the one that we most likely are going to use for very long and sustained passages. And I want to talk a little bit about the options that we have in the play area. So first of all, here we can access different options that can be used for the selected articulation. So if I don't have legato on, I can play more than one note at a time, right? But if I engage the legato, now I can play one note at a time, and the transition between each note is more realistic. I can also engage the mono true legato, which is an advanced legato mode that allows me to control the intensity of the transition part between notes with MIDI velocity. It's a little more realistic. It's a really good addition. Of course, I have portamento that adds a little bit of a slide into the next note. Really beautiful. And then I have the option to have the consordino. This gives you a glacier, slightly less powerful sound that is really beautiful for very smooth and calm passages. Really, really nice. So all these options can be controlled with control changes. You have the list of control changes right here, and that's what I was doing. I was using my TouchOSC iPad template to just control all these options, right? So I'm going to take the Sordino out. Now the other great things is that here I have 3 different moods that allow me to quickly change how the orchestra sounds. The classic is the traditional, probably the one that's going to be most used, but I can switch to soft. And when I switch to soft, first of all, it's kind of cool because you see a visual effect, definitely a softer color. But what happens is that the consordino is engaged automatically, and also the sensitivity of the dynamics works better at lower dynamics. So it's just the whole orchestra sound a little bit smoother. I can also, on the other hand, engage the epic mode, and the player switch to a fiery red color. And again, this mood emphasizes more the higher dynamics. So it's very nice how I can quickly switch mood without getting too caught up in all the different parameters. Final thing I want to mention is the microphone settings. This is really the area that to me is really an amazing feature of Olive Strings 2. We have up to 6 microphones for each articulation. And there are 3 closed mics and 3 kind of room mics. We have the closed section, and the beautiful thing is that if I switch to mic positions, I can actually see where those mics are placed. So I'm just gonna have the closed section. So basically a microphone close to each instrument, and this is how it sounds. As you can see, suddenly the violins are really panned on one side, right? I also have the closed principal mic. So this is the first violin mic of the section. And it adds a little bit of rosin, right? A little bit of really detailed attack. I also have the closed overhead. So this is like the overhead for the section. Really beautiful, very spacious. I have the mid mic. They're basically right where the conductor is. This is a beautiful open sound that I really, really like. The main microphones are basically a Decca tree right where the conductor is. And this gives me less, a wider stereo image, but a really smooth color. And then some of my favorite are the surround sound mic. So the beautiful thing is that you can combine all these different mics. So some of my favorite options are closed section with a touch of principal, and the main. That's a nice sound. It gives details, but also a very open texture. But we can use the surround rather than the main, and suddenly everything opens up a little bit. So as you can see, we have infinite possibilities here, but I really like this option because you can have a very detailed placement of your strings on the virtual stage. And all these mics are available for all the different articulations. So really a beautiful, beautiful library. I love that it's small, that is intimate. And one option that you can have is to use this as divisi for your Hollywood strings. It's true that Hollywood strings has divisi, but this would also add a slightly different option if in case you need divisi. In the next moment, I'm going to show you a small sequence that I did. Is my test sequence for string libraries. It is an excerpt from Adagio for strings from Barber, and it's really a good test trial for strings because it has really smooth dynamics and a lot of legato strings. So let's jump to that session and let's see how Hollywood Strings 2 does with the test. Okay, let's take a look at the Adagio for strings by Barber. This is an excerpt that I sequenced using only Hollywood Strings 2. The only exception are the divisi, where I have the second violin divisi and the cello divisi played by the divisi patch in Hollywood Strings. I just did that just to have a slightly different blend. And since Hollywood Strings doesn't have, Hollywood Strings 2 doesn't have divisi, I use the divisi from the other library. So here I just used a simple setup. I have my different parts here, and I sequenced in both in the same track. I sequenced my notes and also my controllers. I'm going to get a little more in details about which controllers I used to control what, but basically I have my notes right here that I played in real time. Highly recommend always playing in real time your parts. And then I did my dynamics with expression, again, while I was recording the part. And then I did an overdub with controller 1 for the vibrato. My setup for the opus is actually fairly simple, and I'm gonna again go in details about this in a second. But I use my 5 main parts here from Hollywood Strings 2, and then, as I said, the 2 divisi from Hollywood Strings for violins 2 divisi and cello divisi. I used master key switches patches, mainly because I wanted to experiment with different articulations, and I did a couple of switches which I'm going to talk about in a second. And I did also, in terms of mixing, I used different type of mics, and again, I'm going to just give you the details in a little bit, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what we're going to listen to. So let me just play it as it is, right? So here's the Adagio for strings by Barber, played by Hollywood Strings 2. Let's take a closer look at what I did in terms of articulations and also in terms of mix and different mic positions. If I open up my instance of Hollywood Strings 2 here, first of all, I used in pretty much all the different patches, either legato or mono through legato, to have a smoother transition between articulations. I used key switches for all my main parts here, and I used just individual articulation for my divisi violin 2 and cello. In the articulation option, I turned off some that I would not need, so I would save a little bit of RAM. But also I took advantage of the beautiful options here that we have of exporting Logic Pro articulation set. What this does is that depending on the articulation that I set up here, it's going to export an automatic articulation set for Logic for a specific track. So if I look here, for my violin 1, I'm using the violin KS master articulation set. If you're not familiar with the articulation sets in Logic, it's a really great feature that allows me to select for each note its own articulation, basically bypassing the old key switches option. And so as you can see, for the first note here, I used a sustained full, but then for the other notes here, I used the legato bow change. And again, for the longer sustained notes, I used a sustained full, but then here towards the ends, I used a legato slur, just to give a different vibe, a different sense of movement, of changes, right? Instead of having the same articulation over and over. And again, it's a great feature. You can access it by simply selecting your part here, then going to articulation, select and set your articulations key switches, but then if you go to the small menu here on the top right, you can select Export Logic Pro Articulation Set. And once you export it, it's going to show up under your articulation set option. So here I have articulation set for violins 1 and violins 2. So that simplified a lot the changes of articulations. The other thing I want to point out is the mixing I did in terms of different microphones. So for all my main strings, I used a combination of the closed mics and some of the rooms. So I used the closed section and the closed principal. You can see them right here. So the closed section and the closed principal. And then I used the main and the surround. That gives a very kind of lush but still yet detailed and intimate sound that I really like for this type of piece that has a very somber type of attitude, right? In the mix, I also added a little bit of the epic hall reverb, just to kind of mix and give a little bit more of a lush sound to the string section. And also in my mixing board here, I used two space designers, reverbs, pan left and right to give a little bit more of a special final touch. And I used a fairly large reverb with a little bit of pre-delay, but I like to kind of give an extra vibe to the entire orchestra. I also added some small tempo changes. Those are random tempo changes that gives me a little bit the feel of a real orchestra rather than something that follows precisely the click. This gives me, a nice kind of smooth and realistic effect. Right here, there was a little bit of a breath that the strings had to play. So to recreate that, I simply dropped the tempo drastically for a couple of beats just to give the impression that the orchestra is just pausing a little bit. What I like to do also when I do this type of production is to add a couple of tricks. Again, this has nothing to do with Hollywood Strings 2, but it's just something that I do with any type of production. And so I triple tracked a real violin for violin 1, and I triple tracked also violin 2. Those two are mixed very, very low in the mix, just to add a little bit of a realistic vibe, especially between legato passages. So again, just a touch of color underneath, nothing major. You don't want to be too present in the mix, but just a little bit in the mix are really gonna add a touch of realism. And then I also add some performance noises. These are basically room tones, or kind of like people in the room. Again, mixed very, very, very low, but that give the impression of somebody being there rather than just a cold sample, right? So let's hear it now with the real strings, triple tracked violin 1, triple tracked violin 2, and the performance noises. And that's it. This is how Hollywood Strings 2 sound, again with the addition of a little bit of real violins 1 and 2. But I really like this Hollywood Strings 2 orchestra, very, very realistic. I love the small sections. I really like to write for that type of ensemble. But overall, I really like the overall sound. So I hope you enjoy this walk through Hollywood Strings 2, and try it out and let me know what you think. Bye.